What if the thing in your house learned your routines better than you did, and every night it practiced you a little closer? Welcome back to Whispering Abyss. Tonight's collection is built for headphones in dark rooms. From a neighbor's window that glows when no one lives there to a doorbell that rings itself at exactly 3:07. Every story is a thread you can pull, but you might not like what unravels. Which story creeped you out the most? Let me know in the comments. Story 1. The red light in Unit 4B, it started with a wink. Not mine. The building exhaled. The radiator made that little hiss, then a click like a throat swallowing, and a red pinprick in the fourth floor window flashed once, as if it knew I was watching. It was not bright. It was the soft kind of red you get from a standby light, the kind that says I'm sleeping until you touch me. I stood at my own window holding my breath as the heater cooled, listening to the pipes settle, and I waited to see if it would wink again. It did not, which somehow felt worse. Rent was cheap because the building was old enough to have opinions. Key scratched for a while before finding the lock. The elevator smelled like metal coins and someone's breath. There was a clause in my lease that said curtains must be fully closed after midnight, which felt like a joke until I noticed every other window obeyed. I work nights transcribing audio, the kind of work that makes silence feel like a coworker who judges your pace. The only person I talked to often was Mina across the hall. She worked days and left recycled wine bottles outside with hopeful notes. We traded favors like we traded the hallway light. The first time I saw the red again, it was after 3 a.m. I had just finished a dictator's muffled interview and stretched with my head against the glass. The elevator panel in our building jumps from 3 to 5. We joke that the architect was superstitious or cheap. In the lobby, someone had taped a sticky note above the mailbox slots. Do not look at the red, written in block letters with a dull pencil. The outlet near the elevator buzzed faintly and felt warm, though nothing was plugged in. The smell of hot dust was thicker than usual, like a burnt coin forgotten on a windowsill. The radiator clicked in a set of 4. Then it swallowed. While I looked back at the window across the alley, the red had slid 2 inches to the left. I do not mean it moved while I watched. It was just suddenly there, like it had been always there, like my memory stepped sideways to keep the world neat. I tried that thing where you look at the edge of something so it cannot tell you are staring. It stayed. The clock on my stove changed to 3:04. The red brightened once, then again, clean pulses like a heart practicing. I counted to 5 and promised myself I would stop at 10, then counted to 12 because I needed a rule to break. Something in the radiator counted with me. In the morning that felt like night, I asked the building manager if someone had moved into 4B. He held his coffee like a shield and said 4B was storage. He said the floors were renumbered after a renovation and that I should not worry about it. His voice had a practice yawn. He had seen the note in the lobby and took it down while we spoke. The radiator near the office clicked once, and for some reason he glanced at the ceiling like it lived there. When I left, I pushed the elevator button for 4, knowing it would skip, and still I waited for a miracle that did not care about buttons. That night, I tried to act like I had a bedtime. I closed my curtains at 11:59 because the lease said so, then opened them again at 12:01 because my curiosity has never signed a lease in its life. At 3:04 the red blinked, small and smug. I raised my phone to take a photo, and the camera showed me that was not in the same place as the one my eyes could see. When I lowered the phone, my nose bled without a warning drip. The smell of hot dust sharpened, exactly like a heater that has just eaten a dead moth. I pinched my nose and looked at the floor, but the red stayed bright behind my eyelids like an afterimage that knew my name. A new sticky note was on my door in the morning. Do not look at the red. The handwriting matched the one from the lobby. Mina laughed when she saw it and said she wished our building did seasonal themes instead of year-round creepy. She had a film student's backpack and a tiny ring light clipped to the strap. I watched her reflection on the elevator doors and noticed that when we rode from 3 to 5, the panel flickered a number that did not exist. The radiator hissed, then clicked in 4s as if it were counting time we could not see. Mina touched my arm when she stepped off at 5 and said, "Serious for once, do not stare, okay?" I did not intend to stare. I set a timer to force myself to look away. Every time it went off, I flinched. The red did not. At 3:04 it brightened. At 3:05 it shifted half an inch to the right. At 3:06 it lowered itself to the level of a standing person's eye. At 3:07 it dimmed just enough to make me doubt the previous 3 minutes. At 3:08 I checked the hallway camera feed on the building portal and froze. The screen showed me standing outside the door to 4B at 3:12 a.m., my head tilted, my hand on a knob I had never touched. The clip repeated twice, then vanished, then returned with the timestamp cropped tighter, as if embarrassed to be seen. I asked the manager about the footage. He said the system hiccups when the network is under load. He asked why I was checking the feed at that hour. He said someone had filed a complaint about me standing in the hallway at night. My stomach did the slow drop it does in an elevator when your brain does the math before your body feels it. The radiator behind the office clicked in fours, then stopped. I waited for the swallow, and when it did not come, the silence felt like someone listening. The brownout hit that evening. Not a full blackout, just a dimming like the building had been told to whisper. My phone battery fell faster than it should have, drawing heat from my hand. The dead outlet by the hallway was warm again, the kind of warmth that feels like a breath you cannot place. Mina did not answer her door. Her peephole looked at me like an eye without a lid. I knocked 3 times, then 4, then stopped when the radiator behind me clicked 4 times in reply. My voice felt too loud in the hall. I went back inside and slid the deadbolt, as if a metal bolt could convince light not to pass through glass. I decided Mina was pranking me. She had told me once that she was doing a project on attention, something about how cameras change the way we act. She had the ring light. She knew about the lease clause and the elevators missing 4. She had the kind of mind that would leave a note that looked like a warning but counted as a test. It felt better to believe she was testing me than to consider the memory of standing where I had not stood. If you have ever talked yourself into calm, you know how your heart politely plays along until something small taps the glass. I dialed her and got a voicemail that started with silence. Then her voice said, "Leave a message," and then a thin digital tear ran through the audio like a zipper closing. A second voice under hers said this mailbox is no longer in service as of Friday. It was Tuesday, unless the stove clock had started lying. I checked the building portal again and found a message from Mina posted 3 days ago, saying she would be away visiting family. The timestamp said 2:47 a.m., but the photo of her suitcase in the lobby had morning light on it. The radiator clicked once, and I smelled hot dust behind me, even though the heater was cold. There were 2 options: tape the windows with garbage bags and pretend the world ends at the edge of plastic, or stop pretending and go to the door the building insists does not belong to a floor. I wish I had chosen the bags. I told myself I needed evidence, and evidence does not bloom in the dark. I pulled the curtains down and laid them on the floor. I made an X on my window with 2 flashlights taped handle to handle, the beams crossing where the red lived. I set my phone to record. If you're shouting at me in your head, I deserve it. I wanted the truth. The truth hurt me. The first consequence was simple. As soon as I lined the X on the glass, the red brightened and the air in my room warmed like someone had opened an oven a crack. My nose bled again, but this time the drip was slower, as if the building had remembered its manners. The second consequence did not introduce itself right away. It was the itch at the corner of my left eye that turned into a throb, that turned into a new kind of seeing. The radiator clicked, 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 and then swallowed. Somewhere in the alley, a cat knocked something over, and the sound made me jump in place. At 3:0 for the red pulsed. 1. At 3:05 it pulsed again. 2. The radiator answered in sets of 4. I whispered the numbers under my breath. 7-8. I thought of the sticky note from the lobby and the twin on my door and realized that warnings only feel useful when they are too late to use. 9-10. The light crossed the beams I had made on my window and paused there, like a moth finding a warm place to rest. 11. A high tone I could not hear with my ears pricked the back of my neck anyway, the way silence sometimes hums. 12. The room did not brighten. My eye did. The dead outlet by my door was warm enough to fog in the cold air. I pressed my hand to the metal plate and felt a small pull, like hot breath drawing heat from a spoon. Behind it was a maintenance panel with 4 screws. I only meant to check it. The screws came out like they had been waiting for the invitation. Behind the plate was drywall scored with a rectangle shaped like a door someone decided should be part of a wall. The smell of hot dust poured out. I pressed, and something clicked, and a seam opened that should not have existed, like a mouth forming a new word. The corridor was the width of my shoulders and the height of my bad posture. I held one flashlight in my teeth and one in my hand. The beam found another metal plate with a painted number that tried to be shy. For B. The door had no knob, just a smooth circle where a keyhole would be if anyone were honest. I cataloged reasons to turn around. My job, my lease, the way silence amplifies your name. I set the flashlight against the wall so the X on my window would still catch my apartment. I touched the circle. The radiator in the hall clicked once, twice, 3 times, 4. The door unlatched like a throat. Inside was a room the size of a memory that wants to be larger. The walls were dressed in mirrors. Not one mirror repeated another. Some were clouded. Some were sharp as knives, just out of paper. A dozen small tripods sat like polite spiders around the perimeter, each with an empty shoe where a camera should be. The red did not sit on a device. It hung in the air at human height, like a recording light that had expectations. When I looked away, it drifted closer in the mirrors. When I looked at it, it pretended to be patient. The air tasted like coins. I said Mina without meaning to. Her name sounded thin in the room, like a postage stamp on a package that weighs too much. For a second, I thought I saw her in a mirror near the floor, crouched and grinning, as if this were a game. But when I moved the beam, it was only my own face bent at an angle I would never choose. I took a step, and the red did not. Then it did. Not forward, inward. It sank into the glass of the nearest mirror and swam there like a fish that finally found water. My mouth was dry. The radiator behind the walls swallowed again, but there was no hiss before it, just the sound of being noticed. The first answer was that the red was a recording light without a camera, the diner sign without the diner. The second answer was worse. Every time I blinked, the red in the glass matched the rhythm. It was not mirroring the motion of my lids. It was borrowing it. When I held my eyes open until they burned, the red flickered anyway, a stutter that lived inside my head. I raised the flashlight and made the X shape again. And for a heartbeat, the room was full of small crosshairs, each one a tiny target on my own reflection. Then something warm slid over my left pupil like a contact lens I did not put in. If you have ever been given eye drops you did not want, you know the helpless tilt of your face. I felt pressure where my iris meets the white, and then a small, cool relief as if a light had found home. My throat made a sound I do not practice. The mirrors brightened a shade that had no source. I stepped back into the hall, and my heel hit the maintenance plate, and the light in my apartment through the crack looked like a different night. I wanted to tell the room to stop. The red understood this as looking, and looking as permission. I ran. Not fast, not well, but with the kind of speed that agrees to be slowed by corners and doors. The corridor behind me was not long, but long enough to be longer the second time you cross it. The maintenance door closed on my shoulder and flexed like a muscle. I got it shut and put my weight against it and felt it press back once, the way a person might press their palm to yours and wait. The plate went cool under my hands. The dead outlet ticked like a cooling engine. In my apartment, the 2 flashlights fell off the window and rolled until their beams shone under my couch like frightened pets. Sleep did not arrive. The red in my left, I pulsed on its own. It felt small, then big, then like it had always been there, but quiet. The radiator in my bathroom clicked in 4s and then did not swallow. When I leaned toward the mirror, my pupil tightened as if trying to hide. A faint glow sat in it like a bead of candy someone had dropped in a glass of water. If you have ever seen your own face look back with an unfamiliar habit, you know the urge to negotiate. I blinked and the red blinked, and for the first time it was not the building answering me. It was me answering it. Morning tried to pretend it knew the rules. The manager's office was empty, the coffee cup clean, the chair tucked in. The bulletin board had nothing but thumbtack holes like pupils around missing eyes. Mina's door had fresh paint on it that smelled faintly like apples. There was no note on my door. There was one inside my jacket pocket that I did not put there. Do not look at the red. The handwriting had changed. It slanted now, like a person starts to lean after standing too long. My phone held a new clip I did not record of me sleeping. My left eye visible between my lashes, the pupil not black but soft red, winking once every 12 seconds. I went to work and pretended to hear only what I needed to type. In the background of a senator's interview, I heard a radiator click 4 times. In the space between a journalist's questions, I smelled hot dust like the studio had burned something innocuous. I know how it sounds. You can chalk it up to paranoia if that makes the floor feel more solid under your feet. At 3:00 for the light in my eye pulsed, though I was in a different building. I closed my eyes and saw the mirrors anyway, as if my eyelids had learned projection. I whispered 12 along with it to see if it would notice. It did. By the next night, the elevator refused to open at 3. It went from lobby to 5 without apology. The panel did not flicker the way it used to. The number 4 tried to appear, then gave up like a shy kid at roll call. I slid a letter under Mina's door, and it slid back out 2 minutes later without the envelope, like a mail slot with a sense of humor. The radiator swallowed at the exact moment the letter returned, and a little fog came out of the slot like breath on a winter day. I put my ear against her door and heard a faraway click, then another, like something counting up a staircase. I fell asleep on the couch with the lights on and woke to my phone buzzing with a voicemail I did not hear arrive. It was Mina's voice again, layered with that second voice that said the mailbox was gone. Underneath both was another track, like a metronome that failed to be discreet. 3 clicks, pause, 1 click, pause, 3 clicks again. If you have ever played with an old tape recorder, you know the sound of a record light turning on and off when someone messes with it. I replayed it until the battery died, even though it was plugged in. The dead outlet on my wall was warm enough to make my fingers sweat. I want to tell you, I slept somewhere else. I want to tell you I moved. I did look up month-to-month storage units with a security code door, the kind with blue roofs and numbers that make sense. The prices almost convinced me. Then the building sighed in that way it does. The radiator hissed and clicked, and I felt the light in my answer from inside my skull. It felt rude to leave without saying goodbye. It felt worse to imagine the red watching me sleep in a stranger's room. I pulled on a jacket and went back to the maintenance plate because horror does not like to be ignored. The screws did not fight me. They spun out like they had been oiled by a helpful ghost. The drywall cut that made the secret door gave way when I pushed with the heel of my hand. The corridor breathed, if a space can do that without air. At the 4B plate, I did not pause. The circle that is not a knob was cold this time. The radiator clicks were faint, like someone having a hard time swallowing. I thought about those tripods. I thought about rooms that record without cameras. I thought about how red lights are a courtesy light, a way to say, do not interrupt. I turned the circle and went inside anyway, because I had nothing left that interruption would ruin. The mirrors waited. The tripods waited. The red was already inside my eye, so the room did not need to host me. That is what I told myself to justify the way the light on the ceiling, which had never been there before, came on by itself. It was not a bulb. It was a flat sheet of brightness that made me feel like a specimen on a clean dish. My reflection looked like a person volunteering for a test they do not understand. I lifted my hands to show I had nothing to hide and saw the faintest red glow through my left eyelid. The room did not blink, so I did not either. The world loves a polite guest. The floor was cooler near the far wall. I walked toward it because walking away never works after the second act. In the bottom left corner of a concave mirror, a square of darkness was cut out like a missing tooth. Inside that square, another room showed itself. It was the manager's office, but older, with a calendar from a year that does not matter anymore. On the desk, a small camera lay on its side, its recording light dead and cracked. The mirror did not show me standing there. It showed me sitting in the office chair, my head tilted, my left eye soft coin of red. When I lifted my hand, the version of me in the mirror kept it down. I reached out and touched the edge of the cutout. It was real, not glass. The smell of hot dust came strong enough to make my eyes water. The radiator clicks were inside my head now, polite but insistent, for at a time like a metronome having a thought. I do not know why I did what I did next. I touched my left eye. It did not hurt. It felt like touching the back of a tiny watch and feeling the tick through the metal. The red brightened for one beat, then dimmed, exactly like a recording light that has been acknowledged. The mirror breathed. The office inside the cutout went dark, as if someone closed a lid. I left, not because I won, because the room had nothing else to say to me that night, and my body remembered how to be tired. The corridor let me through like a friend who does not want a hug. The maintenance plate settled quietly. In my apartment, I hung the curtains back, because a rule sometimes gives you the illusion of order. The radiator in the bathroom clicked in fours, and then finally swallowed, and the silence after it swallowed was the kind of silence you buy noise machines to pretend to own. If you have ever sat on the edge of a tub to negotiate with your own face, we have already met. The next morning, the lease office existed and did not. The sign was there. The door was locked. Behind the glass, the room looked staged, furniture with no scuffs, a plant that never loses a leaf. The sticky note on my jacket pocket had changed again, now folded into a small square that would not unfold. When I held it to the light, I could see letters on both sides, overlapping like voices in a voicemail. "Do not look at the red," said one. "You're looking," said the other. The elevator offered me 3 to 5, and I took it. I did not try the panel again because I had already learned something: you do not need a button to confirm. I will move. That is what I tell myself when the radiator goes quiet and the room feels crowded with my own breath. I will move and leave the red behind. Then I blink, and the tiny coin of light answers once, a pulse so gentle I could choose to call it nothing. I tilt my head and see it in the mirror, floating in the black of my pupil like a star someone taped to glass. I turn off the bathroom light, and the dot is still there. It is smaller than fear and larger than a thought. The smell of hot dust comes from a mirror instead of the heater, and the mirror clicks softly for times, then swallows like a throat finally relieved. There is one thing I have not told you, because I am not sure it matters. Last night, when I folded my laundry, I found a second sticky note in the pocket of a shirt I had not worn since last week. It said, "Do not look at the red." The handwriting was mine. I do not remember writing it. It has a crease as if it had been folded and unfolded many times by a person who could not decide whether to obey. I put on my desk. It slid an inch to the left when I looked away. I filmed it. The clip shows my hand doing it. I do not remember moving my hand. If you have ever been your own red herring, you know the taste. If you hear a hiss and a soft click behind this narration, it is just my radiator. If you see a small red reflection in your screen, it is probably a notification you forgot to clear. If you're listening in the dark and a tiny light answers when you blink, it is only the afterimage of my story, trying to be polite. That is what I tell myself when I wash my face and avoid my left eye. That is what I tell myself when the bathroom mirror clicks 4 times and then swallows, and a single red dot hangs in the black like something waiting to be told where to point. Now we move to the second story, if you want to hear it. Story 2, Doorbell After 3 a.m. The bell learned my schedule before the town did. It waited until the ride map drained of little pink fares, until the roads turned to cold ribbons and the last convenience store clerk pulled his drawer. Then, at 3:07 every single night, it sang one tired chime that rang longer than metal should, a note that thinned and somehow never quite died. When it faded, the air on my porch smelled like wet, well, even on clear nights, and my porch camera uploaded a clip that made me wish I was the kind of person who slept through alarms. I drive nights because the house needs a roof and my brakes need a friend. The camera was not for vanity. It shaved $20 off my insurance, and 20 was 2 gallons of milk in a morning where my sister did not worry about me. She lives 2 doors down. Our mother left us this place and a handful of strange rules that we joked about until we did not. Keep the doormat on the sill. Do not answer bells after 3. If you smell wet wool, say a small prayer to the ordinary. We kept the house and the jokes. The rules only came back when the clock did. The first ring happened the night the town went quiet before I did. I was counting the tips that lived like lint at the bottom of the cup holder when the chime raised a single note and laid it on the porch. I checked the camera feed. Person detected, it said, outlining emptiness with a neat green box. I opened the door to air that knew me, but no one stood at the mat. Except the mat was not there. The clip uploaded 40 seconds later, a little blue thumbnail in my app. I tapped, and the video showed a figure standing precisely where the mat should have been. The figure wore a coat I owned and a posture I did not want. I told myself the algorithm was bored. I told myself a moth had tripped a motion field, and the late upload was only the network remembering to keep time. The next night, 3:07 again, chime upload wet wool. The mat had moved 2 inches toward the left step. You would miss it if you had not grown up in a house where our mother measured everything with her eyes. On the third night, it moved 3 more. Dirt dragged under it like the tail of a little arrow. My rideshare app pinged a new request at 3:06 with my own address in the pickup bar. I laughed because the alternative felt too much like listening. Sleep at noon never sticks, but I tried. My sister texted me a photo of my own porch mat with a caption that tried to be light. "Your house is teaching math," it said. Then a second text followed with no joke in it. "If you hear the bell, do not open. Mom used to say that. You remember." I did remember, but not the reasons. I remembered her standing at the kitchen sink when the old chime rang a second longer than it should, her hand pausing midair, the sound finding a place under her tongue. Dementia took words from her in pieces, but she kept that rule to herself until the end, as if explaining it would make it less true. By the 4th night, the camera had found a new hobby. It drew detection boxes around empty air and wrote numbers over them. Height, gait, confidence 87%. Every set matched me within an inch, within a swing of my left foot that still favors the scar from the bike crash when I was 11. A neighbor kid named Jace has a coat like mine, I told myself. Jace is in love with the idea of pranks. He knows my Wi-Fi. He once set our street's smart lights to pulse with a dance remix until Mrs. Hernandez hunted his mother with a broom. The theory fit until it scraped. I knocked on Jace's door the next afternoon and got his mother instead, flustered and proud in a way that made me ache. They were across state lines for a robotics competition. She showed me a photo of him in a gym with a trophy made of bolts and glue. The timestamp was 3:10 a.m. If you want a red herring to live, do not verify it, even with kindness. I walked home and flipped my breaker to the porch. The little chime by the door should have been dead metal then. But when 3:07 rolled its shoulders and arrived, the bell sang anyway, weak but certain, like a tuning fork someone had swallowed. The 5th night arrived like it had done me a favor. I decided to cut the wire. The paper tag hanging from it was brown and fragile, stapled there by a hand that might have been my grandfather's. "Do not cut while powered," it said, as if the bell were a live animal. I traced the line down to a crawlspace hatch I had not opened in years. The mat's dirt arrow had been right the whole time, pointing like a patient teacher to the seam in the lattice. When I dropped to my knees, the air smelled like flooded coats and the first laundry day of winter, and the smell felt like a question I did not want to ask out loud. Under the porch, the earth breathed cool. Wooden slats rubbed their old throats against each other when the wind thought about changing. I crawled until my shoulders complained and found the source. Not the modern plastic doorbell chime that lives in a hallway, but an older metal box the size of a hardcover book. A wire ran to it, and from it to a thick little relay that ticked to itself like a metronome that could not count past 1. No power light, no battery, nothing to explain the hum. I could feel more than hear. The tag was tied to the wire with string that had learned the local dust. I cut the wire on a safe minute, or what I thought was safe. I timed it between rings, between hums, between the soft relay clicks. The moment the blades bit copper, the chime rang so loud the sound pushed my throat open. A coil inside the box glowed dull for a second, like a furnace remembering how, and the smell of wet wool climbed into the space and sat on me. Above, the bell rang again, softer but crueler, as if happy to have been acknowledged. When it faded, the hum was still there, unchanged, and the relay ticked again and again at the same slow pace that the clock on my stove was trying to keep. I backed out, hands black with crawl space, wire limp in my fist like I had only cut a tail that would regrow. The camera sent me a push notification, even though I had turned its features off. Motion detected. Person seen. The thumbnail showed a coat sleeve I recognized because the cuff is frayed where I snagged it on a door hook last fall. I opened the clip. The figure on the step had my keys in his left hand, even though my keys were in my right. He did not press the doorbell. He stood close and waited, and the bell rang on its own from the old box under my porch, as if the house were obliging a guest I could not see. I disabled the camera entirely the next day. No silenced features, no privacy timers, just off. I woke to 3 emails from my insurer that I did not want to open because we all know the cadence of bad news. First, we notice your device has gone offline. Second, your discount has been suspended until the device is reconnected. Third, please note, repeat disconnections may affect your policy. A chime rang in my head that had nothing to do with the porch. My sister did not answer my texts. She had always been quick thumbs. Her silence was kind of weather I did not know yet. At 3:07, my rideshare history showed a completed acceptance I had not made with a pickup from my own address. The passenger name was blank. The house loves people who pretend terms are theirs. I reconnected the camera and told the air that I would be the one to watch, not the other way around. The mat had drifted so far that a corner hung over the step like a tongue. I pulled it square, even though I knew by midnight it would creep again. I opened the crawl space hatch and pressed my palm to the metal box. The hum licked the bones in my hand. I put my ear to it and heard a second sound layered under the relay tick, something like the sigh of a coat hung up after rain. I am not superstitious, but I understand chorus. The box was not alone. I wanted the simple fix. I wanted the trick breaker in the panel that solved your problem and makes you feel silly but safe. The chime did not care what I wanted, and the wire did not care that I had divided it. The logic that lived in the crawl space lived outside logic too. It had the patience of things that are not required to learn. I closed the hatch because pretending to tidy is an old family ritual. Then I stood on the step at 3:06, door unlocked, camera online, heart like the smallest drummer learning tempo. I set the phone to record my face and the porch and the street. I told the empty to show me its source. I used my voice like a key. The bell rang on schedule without anything touching it. The chime poured into the porch air and made the wet wool smell bloom from nowhere. My phone vibrated and the camera pushed a live view. On the screen, I saw me on the step, shaky, and I saw me down at the sidewalk walking up the path with my keys in my left hand. The lens did not glitch. The light did not smear. They were both me, and the camera chose to be generous about it. The me at the sidewalk raised a hand like a man reaching to tap a window to get a friend's attention. I could hear the relay in the crawl space, keeping count, slow and pleased. He was not a mirror. Mirrors are obedient. He stopped at the place where the mat used to be before it learned to move and nodded like we were meeting in a line we both knew. He wore my coat, damp at the cuffs. The smell made sense now. The keys in his left hand matched the scar on my ring finger exactly, a pale half moon from when I caught on my bike chain as a kid. He was me 1 minute ahead or 1 minute behind. It did not matter which, because the bell did not care about direction. It cared about 3:07, and 3:07 was a place he could stand. He held something up. It was my damp wool coat, or perhaps there was only one, and it did not mind being two. He tried to hand it to me without crossing the threshold. The rule from our mother's mouth rose uninvited. Do not open. Do not open, even when the caller knows your voice. If you have ever ignored a rule because you're tired of being tired, you know the shape the air takes when it prepares to punish you with the truth. I reached, then stopped, then reached again because curiosity is a crueler currency than money. The camera drew a green box around both of us, like a parent trying to include everyone in a family photo. If I accepted, I knew without words that I would be standing where he stood and he would be inside. He did not smile. He did not threaten. He made the universal face people make when they want to relieve you of carrying something heavy, the little wince of "let me help." In the glass of the window, I saw a smear of my own reflection that did not match either of us perfectly, like a bad edit in a film that slipped through. My phone buzzed a warning in my hand. New request at your location, pickup 306. Do you accept? I stepped back. It felt like blasphemy to refuse relief. It felt like blasphemy to refuse your own face. The bell did not ring again. He waited as if politeness could not be punished. The coat dripped once, a bead that fell very slowly in the porch light, as if obeying a gravity that was thinking. I said no. I said it out loud into my phone and to his hand. The camera's green boxes jittered and blinked away as if embarrassed. He nodded, turned, and walked back down the path, and the video showed him step off the curb and then be gone as if the sidewalk had learned evaporation. The door was closed without me closing it. Inside, on the hook where I draped my hat, hung a damp wool coat, mine and not mine, a weight that had not been there when I locked up. It smelled like my grandfather's car in November, like a high school hallway between snow and the bell. Water gathered under it in a tiny crescent on the floorboards, as if proof could choose a shape. When I checked my rideshare history, a completed pickup sat there from 307 with my name half erased by a string of marks that did not map to letters. The tip field was blank. The route line on the map led from my house to my house in a circle that would have been funny an hour earlier. My sister called at noon with a voice that had a new quiet in it. She said she slept through a doorbell for the first time in weeks. She said she had dreamed of Mom standing at our old sink, listening to the chime like it was a song that tells you your own age. She said the dream smelled like the coat Dad wore when the car heater failed. I looked at the hook. The coat was dry now. The crescent on the floor had become a tiny salt line like the end of certain lakes. If you have ever noticed a change that no one else can catalog, you know the way your throat becomes a locked drawer. I moved a month later. I did the math on rent versus roof versus brakes and decided that paying more to live inside walls that did not hum was not a failure. The new apartment had a doorbell that was part of the intercom, an ugly plastic thing that thought it was in charge. I did not install a camera. The insurer gave me back my discount, as if forgiveness were meant to be a template. I told myself that superstition starves without attention. The first week, I slept 3 nights in a row. The fourth, I woke at 3:07 to a single chime that came from nowhere and resolved into nothing, a note that thinned and did not quite die. There was no porch to open. There was no mat to move. In the morning, my doormat sat inside my front door instead of outside my apartment, a little drift of grit beneath it like the tail of an arrow. A wool coat, I do not remember packing, hung itself on the back of the bedroom chair. It smelled only faintly like rain, like something that had learned to be polite. My phone vibrated once with a notification that had no text. In the rideshare app, a pickup request at 3:06 waited without an address. Except, it said, as if it understood that some rules are songs you only hear after the chorus. If you hear a bell tonight at 3:07, it is probably nothing. If your camera draws a box on empty air and writes your height above it, it is probably a bug. If your mat moves 2 inches toward the place where a house keeps its crawl spaces, you can nudge it back and laugh. Do not open if you can help it. Do not take the coat if someone with your face offers to carry what you already wear. If you catch the smell of wet wool in a dry room, say a prayer to the ordinary. I do, and the prayer sounds like please keep the chorus off my doorstep. For now, the chime decays. For now, the note thins and does not quite die. Now it is the third story's turn. Story 3. The lake that returned my voice. I heard my own voice call my name from across the lake, clear as a voicemail I never recorded, and for a second I thought my stitches had healed overnight. The sound carried over black water like a coin skipping and never sinking. Cold breathed through the cabin screens. Somewhere to my left, a buoy bell counted 1 note and let it hang. On the table, a glass of ice cracked like a tiny knuckle. The smell of wet bark crept in with the dusk and sat in the corners like someone waiting their turn. I put my hand to my throat and felt the throb answer the bell, softer than fear, but steady enough to call me closer. I was not supposed to talk, not even whisper. My surgeon had circled the rule on the release form, and my brother underlined it with a different pen. like double ink would keep me honest. I coach call center agents for a living. Voice pays my mortgage. Voice taught me to read strangers by how they breathe between words. 2 weeks after surgery, Sam drove me to this rental that used to belong to a ranger who nailed rules to trees. He left me a handheld radio, a stack of broth packets, and the look a brother gives when he wants you to get better without needing him a check. "Call me at the first bell," he said. I lifted the radio and nodded because nodding costs less than sound. The ranger's rules were still everywhere in the daylight. Hand-lettered signs that felt like warnings and jokes at the same time. No glass by the dock. No fires under pines. No answering calls after dusk. That last one was half sunk in mud by the trail like the lake tried to swallow it. The dock planks were carved with initials, and near the end a name repeated 3 times where someone had sanded it out and carved it again. Lucy, with 12 little notches like tally marks marching beside it. At the tip of the dock, a depth gauge bobbed and insisted on 3 meters, even when the wind pressed waves across its face as if measuring made water behave. The first night, the voice used my good voice. Not the rasp I had become, not the careful whisper that hurts more than it helps. It was the voice from recordings of old trainings, the one that smiles on vowels and never rushes. It called my name once, then added a sentence I had not said yet. "You will sleep," it promised, and the promise fit my fatigue too well. The buoy bell chimed and rolled away into dark. I stepped onto the first plank and felt the dock give back, a slow spring like an animal waking. In the boathouse, a coil of rope hung, with 12 knots tied through the length, like an abacus no one taught me to use. My fingers twitched to count them. I tried to be clever and silent. I raised my hand and drew a slow circle in the night air, the old hand signal I use in training to ask agents to hold a thought. The voice across the lake laughed, my laugh, too soft to call a laugh, then said I can hold it. The smell of wet bark thickened like the whole shoreline had moved closer. The buoy bell tolled again and carried a fraction of my name in the copper. I stayed still and tried to think very loudly that this was a trick with a speaker, a deep fake, a neighbor with time and boredom. The voice said I would say those exact words to Sam tomorrow, and then it said them before I could. If you have ever tried to outwait a sound, you know how time develops a limp. 12 minutes stretched like taffy and then snapped with another bell. I went back to the cabin and wrote questions in a notebook because I could not afford answers. Who is Lucy? Why 12? Why 3 meters? The ice in my glass split with a tiny complaint. I held the radio, thumb on the transmit, and only pressed it long enough to click. The click felt like a cough I let the room take. In the morning, I circled the signs again. The Lucy plank had new scratches at the end, a 13th try that had only cut the grain. The rope still had 12 knots. I pretended it always would. Sam called it noon, which is morning here because the lake insists. I let him talk while I typed the way we learned after Dad. He said the ranger liked to spook city people and that Lucy was probably a fish with bad PR. He said if I heard anything weird to scan for Bluetooth devices because pranksters love easy pairing. I scanned at dusk with my phone, feeling foolish on the dock. It found my radio, my speaker, a ghost of a stereo from the cabin next door that had not seen a human in a month, and nothing across the water. The bell tolled. Wet bark pushed through the screen and made the cabin smell like a pile of cut logs after rain. That night, the voice altered the loop. It did not wait for me to signal. It replied to things I had not finished thinking. When I pictured the depth gauge and its stubborn 3, the voice said the number does not belong to you. When I pictured the radio as my safety line, it said I would call at the first bell and it would not be to Sam. I walked to the end of the dock and the wood sang under my weight in a low throat tone I felt through my shoes. The gauge stayed at 3. The rope in the boathouse swayed with no help from wind. I left and counted the minutes between chimes like a child, keeping order in the dark. On the third night, the red herring came to life. A clean white light shone from the opposite bank where the map shows an empty track of trees. It cut a triangle on the water like a stage waiting for a reveal. A speaker, I wrote. A prank. I scanned again and even named a device in my head to see if the lake would say it back. The voice used my voice to say the name wrong, then corrected itself like a person practicing a foreign street. The bell struck, and a knot fell from the rope in the boathouse without any hand to loosen it. It slipped to the floor and lay there like a little snake that chose sleep. At the cabin table, I put the radio between my elbows and told myself I would not touch it. It crackled without being touched and said my name in the tone I use when I need an agent to trust me. Then it repeated the sentence I wrote in my notebook while I wrote it, like the speaker rested inside my hand. The battery indicator, always low, brightened for a beat when the buoy bell struck and went dull right after. I know how it sounds. I kept my mouth shut until it felt like a dare. The light on the opposite bank pulsed like a heartbeat the wrong distance away. The wet bark smell moved from the screens to the bedroom and sat on the quilt. I lasted until the fourth bell. My voice found a micro-inch of itself, and I spent it saying a single word. Hello. It came out pitiful and brave, which is how I sound when I do not know who I am doing something for. Pain answered in a thread tug across the stitches. A tiny warmth slid down the back of my throat and tasted metallic and shallow. The depth gauge on the lake flashed once and gave up its number. In its little window, a dash appeared the way a machine shows error when it runs out of ways to pretend it understands. The voice answered from under the dock as if the water had always been our distance and not the far bank. The next morning, the rope had 11 knots and the floor had a small curl of twine like a peeled nail. The neighbor cabin lost power or decided silence, and its little weather station sensor stopped ticking temperatures. I called Sam on the bell, and he did not pick up. Then the radio said his name and mine together in a tone I have never heard us use. The one people use when they rehearse bad news before they say it. The cabin's batteries bled without being used. My phone died when I checked the same 2 photos for the 5th time, the ones of the dock when the lake looks innocent. I charged it, and it died again when I typed the word echo. Silence did not reset anything. I tried it. I sat with my hands under my thighs until my fingers ached to lift. The voice moved closer anyway. It did not taunt. It did not beg. It called me like a friend would if the friend knew you were awake and needed steady company. The bell kept order, and the smell of wet bark filled the bedroom, as if the trees dragged their roots inside to share a floor. The ice in my glass cracked, even when there was no ice. If you have ever had a sound you cannot explain live in your house, you know how your shoulders learn to live a little higher than they should. I went to the boathouse because I wanted a human answer. In a hollow under the shelf, tucked between folded life vests, I found a page from a water-warped notebook. The top line said Lucy in forking pencil. The rest said, I traded my echo for hers, and then the words ran in waves until they blurred. Under the words was a list of 12 dates, the kind you carve without meaning to because your hand wants a tally. The last one had a bell drawn beside it and a little arrow pointing toward the lake like a person reminding herself how the ending goes. I checked the opposite bank in daylight. No cabin, no path, no white triangle light, only trees with wet bark. On the 5th night, I tied the fallen knot back into the rope with the clumsy grace of someone who has to relearn what hands are for. I wrote "Do not answer" on a card and pinned it to the frame of the door so I would have to read it to get outside. Then I said my name anyway because fear prefers to be invited. The bell struck like a teacher who finally hears a student speak up. The voice said my name back, and the echo was wrong in a way that felt honest. My throat hurt in a focused way, like someone pressing a coin into a bruise. The depth gauge did not show a number. It showed the little dash, and then nothing, as if even the error would not commit. At the far end of the dock, something waited that was not person, not animal, not light. It was the shape water makes when it is instructed. The voice stood in it like a person stand in a coat. The buoy bell rang ahead of schedule, pleased, and then late, like a metronome learning a song it does not like. The radio gained a single bar of battery, and Sam was there and not, overlapping with the water repeating words half a beat before he did. He said, "Do not step off," and the lake said, "Do not step off," with my good voice. The one he missed, the one that paid the mortgage and taught dozens of strangers to copy my cadence until they passed their metrics. This is the part 1 I'm least proud of. I wanted my voice back. I wanted the clean sound that makes people believe that a script is empathy. I leaned over the last plank, and the lake leaned up as if we shared joints. The shape in the water did not reach, it waited. It had the patience of all the calls I have taken from customers who learn your name once and say it softly to keep you polite. The rope in the boathouse let go 3 knots as if clapping without hands. The ice on my table cracked and did not break into smaller pieces. The smell of wet bark became the smell of my own cotton shirt after standing in fog. I told the lake a truth I have not told my agents. I told it that I taught scripts because scripts keep panic contained, not because scripts find the truth. My good voice repeated it before I finished. It said the words better than I did, because practice likes a willing pupil. The buoy bell miscounted 11, then gave me a phantom 12 that landed on my teeth. The radio said my name like a hand on my shoulder, and the water said my name like a mirror would if it could speak. The depth gauge sank and rose and vanished like a breath at the end of a cry. The dock groaned a sentence too old to translate. You may hate me for this, but I did not step in. I stepped back so fast my heel hit the knot where Lucy had started to carve an unlucky 13th, and pain jumped up my calf and reminded me I am inside a body that still expects stairs. The lake did not punish me for refusing. It repeated my full name once in a tone that made every hair on my arms try to listen harder. Then it fell silent, as if the word had been returned and the account was waiting for new credit. My voice, the ragged one, stayed put like a small animal that is better at hiding than running. Morning had the shape of a room after someone quiet leaves. The rope had 7 knots. The radio would not power unless I held it next to the buoy bell at the end of the dock, and even then it borrowed the bell's note for every syllable. Sam drove up that afternoon because my one-word texts unnerved him. He walked the trail to the opposite bank with me and found nothing but old boot prints we could not claim. He poked the depth gauge with a stick and it shrugged back to 3 like it had dreamed of honesty and woken up to a rule. He said we were both overtired and that I should come home. I could not argue without sound. He hugged me and left a shiny worry on the porch that I stepped around. I do not know when Lucy vanished. Her notches end with 12. The rope still had 7 when I left the lake 2 weeks later. I took the radio and it would not speak in the city. I put the coil of rope in my trunk and felt like a thief who had only taken the counting, not the thing itself. I kept the do not answer card in my wallet and it reads like a dare in checkout lines. My voice is not what it was. It is smaller, lower, honest in a way that would fail certain training. If you have ever been grateful for a slower conversation, you know why that might be a blessing pretending to be a loss. Here is the part one did not expect. I can hear my good voice in other videos now when I scroll at night, buried under wind on lakes I have never touched. It is faint, the way an old song sounds when your neighbor plays it through a wall. When a buoy bell rings inside a clip from somewhere with mountains. My teeth ache like they remember a pitch. Sometimes the smell of wet bark finds me in the middle of a city block with no trees in sight, and my throat tightens like a hand closing around a warm glass. Sometimes ice in a cup cracks with no heat, and I have to put the cup down and wait for the room to forgive the old sound. If you go to water and it gives you your name back, do not answer on the first night. If the bell counts for you, count something else louder in your head. If you find a rope with knots or a board with notches, understand that another person kept score before you, and their math might not be yours. If a Bluetooth scan returns nothing, consider that the lake does not need to pair to speak. If a depth gauge shows a dash where a number should be, step back until numbers feel like numbers again. I know how this sounds. I also know that some places return what you spend on them and ask interest later when you are tired. I keep 1 glass on my nightstand now, with 4 ice cubes, because I'm a coward who still wants proof. On quiet nights, the top cube fractures with a soft click that does not belong to temperature. It happens once, the way a buoy bell tolls once, and then the room settles as if I had answered. From far away, inside a phone, through a stranger's wind, my own perfect voice tries a line it learned from me, and it gets the timing right. In the city with no water, a sound like a bell bumps the air and refuses to say where it came from. The ice cracks again and holds its shape, and I lie there with my hand over my throat, listening for interest I have not yet paid. If you want to hear how it ends for other people, I could tell you what the next caller left on my voicemail from a reservoir 2 states over. For tonight, I will sleep with the radio off and the window almost closed because wet bark drifts farther than you think. Now it is time to shift shores. Story 4. Blind spots in the security camera at 2:44 every night. Every screen in the security office goes blind for exactly 1 second, and the hum of the fluorescent lights lifts like a breath and holds. The smell of warm plastic swells, sweet and burnt. On my desk, a hairline crack in my coffee mug sends down a single brown tear that hits the same circle on the blotter each time, as if the drip is learning when to arrive. 1 second doesn't sound like much until you see what can move inside it, and then you start wishing the clocks would lie for you. I took this night shift to dig myself out. Debt has a way of turning darkness into an employer, and I needed quiet hours to catch up. I walked the tech office after midnight, badge doors, glass meeting rooms, sensor pings that try to make emptiness feel responsible. The cameras are my coworkers. They don't talk back, but they watch with me. Mara says the job keeps me awake, even when I'm home asleep. She texts me good night right before 2:44, then tries again after, as if her messages have to cross the missing second and pay a toll. The first night I noticed it, I thought my eyes had blinked without telling me. 1 second of static smeared across 12 monitors. Then they returned with everyone right where I'd left them, which is to say, nowhere. Uptime, perfect, the log said, cheerful and smug. In the janitorial feed, the mop bucket had drifted 2 inches toward the closet door, leaving a wet comma on the tile that hadn't been there earlier. An old sticky note fluttered on the console from the last guard. Don't blink at 2:44. A laugh then, the kind of laugh that keeps you from reading something twice. The second night, I didn't blink. I propped my lids on coffee and stubbornness and watched the hum fatten at 2:44 and cut for a breath. Static arrived, like a person stepping between me and a window. When the picture returned, someone stood in the lobby, mid-step, 1 foot floating a hair above the floor. The badge reader showed nobody in or out. My radio hissed a syllable that could have been my name and then thought better. Uptime, perfect, the log repeated. The mug dripped its brown tear with embarrassing precision, like a conductor's cue. My manager, Rod, likes routine the way some people like dogs. He patted the console and said the same patch hits every night. Nothing to worry about. Our systems are robust. He looked at me the way bosses look at night guards who have opinions. I kept my face neutral and my screenshots to myself, except for the one I texted Amara. She wrote back, "Is that a person?" And then, "Stop freezing me out." The timestamp read 2:44 a.m., even though I'd messaged her 5 minutes earlier. You know that feeling when time gets petty with you? The mop bucket had a sense of humor. Each night, after the skip, it sat a little closer to the closet door, metal handle tilted like a listening ear. On the third night, the skip was longer. Not a second and a half, maybe more. When the feeds came back, the figure in the lobby was closer, and there were 2 more. One in the hallway outside the server room, one at the elevator with a hand poised between buttons that don't make noise. I tried to freeze the frame, and the software let me. Everywhere except the exact second I wanted. Uptime, perfect, the log typed again, and I wondered who it was trying to convince. The sticky note disappeared on the 4th night. A rectangle of cleaner glue took its place, like a peeled-off bandage. The hum rose, the static curdled, and the figures were closer again, though none of them had taken a step on camera. The lobby one looked like a coworker I only ever see in daylight. Same jacket, same slouch like sleep is a rumor he refuses to confirm. The coffee mug drip landed right on cue. I found myself looking at it instead of the screens, waiting for the bead to fall. If you have ever watched a clock tick toward a thing you dread, you know how your attention narrows to the worst metronome. Mara stopped replying after midnight, except with messages that arrived together at 3. They stacked and breathed like a deck of cards being squared. I called and got her voicemail, and my own voice sounded like a stranger explaining a delay on a train platform. Rod sent me a performance warning by email for inactivity during a critical time window, which is office for 2:44. The attachment was a still frame of the security office, blank screens, static white. It looked like proof I was asleep, though I was sitting upright, fingers pressed to the desk, eyes open wide enough to ache. I did the stupid normal thing and asked IT. A guy named Vikram met me at noon with a yawning smile and said every patch has a window, and 244 was as good as any. He showed me a calendar full of updates that explained nothing about the figures or the mop bucket. Power logs were clean, no surge, no brownout. He scrolled through uptime and nodded at the word perfect like it was a puppy who had done a trick. When I asked about the janitorial closet camera, he blinked, surprised. "We don't have a closet cam," he said. "You're seeing a reflection or something." That night, I watched the closet camera on the second monitor from the left because I am not good at letting other people decide reality for me. The closet door was a color that tries to be gray and ends up being tired. At 244, the static washed over everything like frost, and when it passed, the closet door was open a finger's width. The mop bucket had moved inside without rolling. A wet arc on the tile said it had turned itself like a dancer pivoting on one foot. Behind the door, darkness looked thick, not black, but crowded, as if a second room stood right behind the first, waiting to be introduced. I told no one, which is the worst choice a person makes in horror, I know. But have you ever tried to explain a door that only opens during a missing second? The next night, I paused the hallway feeds frame by frame around 244. The system skipped me past the exact moment every time, the way your thumb slides off a piano key when your hands are cold. After the skip, the elevator figure had its head turned toward the camera. No face, just the microphone texture of a hood. In the janitorial feed, the closet door was open just enough to be an invitation you can plausibly ignore. I brewed a fresh pot in the cracked mug and told myself to stop watching the drip. The hum lifted, the static rolled over, and the drip fell anyway with such neat timing it felt like the building had learned applause. On my phone, Mara's messages clustered. "Are you okay? Why won't you answer?" Then a voice memo that hit my inbox at 2:44 exactly. 60 seconds of hiss with a shape inside it that made my throat tighten. If you ever hear your name in noise, you know the way your own body tries to pretend it didn't. Here's when a blind spot got greedy. 1 second had become 2, and 2 became 3. The figures spread like condensation, appearing in different feeds after each skip, always frozen mid-motion, always closer to the cameras and to me. In a side hallway, one had a hand on a door labeled electrical, fingers splayed like it was listening through the metal. In the lobby, the one with the daylight slouch now stood with 1 foot lifted, heel a quarter inch off the ground, like a dancer at the part of the song where everyone knows what comes next. Rod came in early and found me rewinding a skip like an addict. He warned me, gently, to keep my activity up. "We can't afford another incident at that window," he said, talking like we had been attacked and not erased. When he left, the smell of warm plastic increased until I tasted it. My tongue felt coated in the sweetness of cheap extension cords. I wiped the mug, and my rag came away brown from the crack like it had a vein. I don't know why I kept drinking. Maybe because routine tastes like immunity. At 2:43 and 55 seconds the next night, I rolled my chair to the janitorial closet feed and told myself I would open the door after the skip and prove it was only an old hinge. The hum rose. "Don't blink at 2:44. The missing sticky note said in my head, like a held-back cough. The static washed through, and when the picture returned, the closet door was wide, the mop bucket already inside, and something like a breeze moved the hanging coats in the back when there was no ventilation in that closet at all. The open doorway looked too dark and too deep at the same time, like a photograph of a tunnel someone had edited to be shirt pocket small. I stood up. The chair groaned like it had missed being used for the last hour instead of the last 10 seconds. I took my flashlight and badge and walked to the closet, because fear is easier to carry on your feet. The corridor smelled like a new laptop booting up. The closet door was closed again when I arrived. My hand hesitated at the knob. The hum from the lights climbed a note and held there, a finger on a piano, key waiting for permission to lift. I checked my phone. 2 hours, 43 minutes, and 28 seconds. I opened the door and found a normal closet on a normal night with a bucket, a mop, and a shelf with paper towels leaning into gravity. I sat in the closet At 2:44 with my flashlight on and my radio off. The light made a perfect coin on the far wall. The mop's shadow leaned like a person thinking too hard. I kept my eyes open, but tears started without asking when the hum rose. The building drew a breath. Static folded over the world. For a second, there was nothing to see because the light itself seemed to go dull. And when the second ended, I was not alone. Figure stood in the closet with me, facing sideways, the way people face when they think they're looking at something and a camera catches them by accident. They did not move. Their clothes hung like the closet air was water. One brushed my sleeve without touching it, and the hair on my arm raised as if the contact had been real. My flashlight lay on the floor where I must have dropped it, shining into a corner that had not been there before. Beyond that corner, the closet extended. That is the only word that fits. It extended like a hallway does when you walk, except I had not moved and my chest would not agree to fill with air. The mop bucket tipped slowly and uprighted itself without spilling. When the next skip came, I was back alone, light on my boots, breath ragged, the door still mostly shut. I ran to the office and scrubbed backward through footage. The skip was there, a tougher band of static. After it, I could be seen walking out of the closet, even though I was sitting at the console. In the lobby feed, my body crossed in front of the camera at 2:45 with the slouch I recognized from mornings when sleep refused solidarity. On the elevator feed, I stood with the figure's head tilted like listening to something I never got to hear. In the desk feed, my chair was empty and the mug drip had already made its mark. It is a special kind of terror to see yourself do something you haven't yet chosen. I called Mara from the landline because my phone had begun losing minutes. It would jump from 2:41 to 2:47 while I scrolled, like a friend skipping the boring parts of a story. Her ring tone curled once, and then became the hiss again, softer this time, almost conversational. "Stop freezing me out," she texted me, timestamp 2:44, and I didn't know how to tell her the freeze was an ecosystem. I typed back, "I'm here," and watched the message hang without delivery. Its little gray bar learning patience. Vikram swore again the next day that no log showed a glitch. He showed me a diagnostics panel updated at 2 hours and 44 minutes with uptime. Perfect selected in a drop-down you can't edit. I asked him to watch with me that night. He couldn't. Patch night. Of course. The building is a tongue that doesn't have to explain its new vowels. In the empty afternoon, I found a second sticky note under the keyboard tray with dried glue on it. The paper had left a skin of itself on the wood, a square of a square, like a tan line. "Don't blink," it seemed to say, not at 2:44, not at all. I left a note for Rod instead. At 2:44, "Come to the closet, bring your key." He didn't come. Maybe the note only exists in seconds that go missing. I don't know. The hum rose. The drip fell. I sat in the closet again with the flashlight and my eyes propped open by fear. The static pressed into the space like a crowd entering a room. When the blind spot opened, the figures were there again, closer, and this time one turned its head toward me. There was a face shape, but no face. A smoothness like plastic, warm and wrong. The way a mannequin looks at midnight when a store forgets to sleep. They didn't reach for me. They waited the way people wait at a revolving door, politely choosing not to meet your eyes because the choreography requires it. Behind them was the extension, the false length room, and at the far end of it, I saw a pin board with papers I recognized. Memos, incident reports, a reprimand with my name on it and today's date. The word inactivity was bolded. The coffee mug drip landed with soft precision, like a foot on carpet, and I realized I could hear it from inside the closet, through the static and the hum, like time itself was practicing step counts. I made my choice. Report again and lose the job on paper first, or walk in the blind spot and lose it another way. Fear has a way of making you curious about doors. Don't, you're saying, and I hear you, but the problem is that the door was already open and some part of me was already standing on the other side. I kept my eyes open because I believe in note like scripture. The hum broke, the static thinned. The figures stepped without moving, and I felt air touch me where the room had been too tight to permit air. On the monitors in the office, a man who as me stood, pushed his chair in with old habits, and walked past the desk. He didn't look back. On the lobby feed, he nodded at the camera the way I nod at cameras when I want them to know I know they're there. The elevator doors opened on a floor that doesn't exist at night. On the janitorial feed, the closet door closed slowly like the last I had awake. In the darkness between frames, a voice memo sent itself to Mara with a minute of hiss. The crack in my mug finally split, and the bottom fell out, leaving the ring of coffee like a little eclipse on the blotter. I can tell you I didn't step forward. I can tell you I stayed rooted to the tile with my eyes dry and aching and my lungs counting seconds like rosary beads. I can tell you that when the blind spot ended, I was in the office again, hands on the desk, monitors calm, mop bucket obedient. Uptime, perfect, the log glowed. I can also tell you that when Rod reviewed the footage in the morning to prepare my termination paperwork, he called in late and hoarse. And when he finally met me, he looked like someone who had watched a person walk out a room through a wall. The cameras showed me leaving. The hours showed me present. The mug was empty and have like a magic trick that got bored. I handed him my badge because I thought that would fix the loop's appetite. It didn't. At 2:44 in my apartment the next night, the refrigerator hummed higher and then paused. The hallway light flicked once. The bathroom fan coughed a second of static. My phone jumped forward 6 minutes by itself and then apologized by vibrating. Mara sent me a heart and a question mark in the wrong order. I sent her a voice memo and deleted it before she could hear the way my breath tried to sync with a building that didn't employ me anymore. If your office has cameras, listen for the part of the night when everyone's electronics agree to hush together. If your mug has a crack and the drip finds a rhythm, consider setting it in the sink before 2:44. If a closet door you've never opened seems to be standing where a blank wall used to be, count to 1 and see if counting helps. Don't blink if you can help it. That last one sounds stupid until you try living inside a second that gets stolen. Then you will learn how much can arrive with the lights still on and the logs writing perfect over and over like a prayer to a God that only measures up time. Now we move to the last one for tonight. If you're still with me, a quick like helps more than you think. Story 5. The house that hums. Last one for tonight. The house sings at 1:11 a.m. and only the water tells the truth. A clear glass on my nightstand trembles when the tone arrives. Not a visible shake, just a skin that tightens and loosens like it's breathing. A half second before it swells, the thermostat in the hall clicks the way a conductor taps a stand, and the air tastes faintly metallic, like a penny you forgot in your mouth. I hold my breath, listening for the note I can't record, wondering what happens when a song learns your name and refuses to forget it. I moved in because the ad promised quiet, and quiet for an audio editor is money dressed like mercy. My clients send dialogue with air conditioners in love with themselves, with refrigerators that sing minor seconds, with neighbors who do not know carpets exist. I carved the junk away for a living. The lease had a line that made me smile when I signed it. Tenant acknowledges potential after-hours disturbances. I thought it meant trains. I didn't think it meant the house itself might keep time. What finally sold me was a window over a maple and a downstairs neighbor who waved like she'd already done me the favor of liking me. She is Mrs. Vale, a teacher retired into opinions. On my first night, she knocked to welcome me with a pie and a warning. "Listen," she said, and tilted her head so sharply her glasses slid. "There's an old note in this building. Some nights it pretends to be your own breath." I laughed because I'm a person who needed the job to work more than I needed a story to be true. She didn't laugh back. She told me her husband had heard a different pitch entirely, and that the house had made up its mind about both of them. "If it sings," she said, "keep your promises or keep your feet moving. Don't do both." The first 1:11, I was awake cutting mouth, clicks out of a podcast about debt forgiveness, which felt like a joke the night told just to itself. The thermostat clicked. The carbon monoxide detector chirped off pattern, not its usual nudge, just a lonely peep like a bird that forgot the rest of the song. Then the tone rose from nowhere and everywhere. My meter stayed flat. The digital recorder heard nothing. The water in the glass made a hairline ring that traveled to the rim and back. like something waiting under the surface had tapped once. I stood in the hall holding my breath the way you do when a room teaches you a rule you didn't ask to learn. I did what every audio person does. I measured. I held my phone up with a Spectrum app ready to pat me on the head, and the app shrugged. Silence. I shut down the fridge. I killed the breaker. The hum kept going like I had misheard the job description of electricity. The breaker labeled spare was warm to the touch, though it had no wires feeding it, which felt like a smirk. I cupped my hand around the thermostat, and it clicked again, half a beat before the tone faded like a polite goodbye. When the air settled, I realized my jaw hurt from clenching, and the glass had tiny ripples that refused to die until I admitted I was watching them. The second night, I placed the glass in different rooms, trying to triangulate a sound with a map made of water. Wherever I went, the thermostat clicked its count in first, and the tone arrived on schedule, 11 minutes long, seated and patient. The carbon monoxide alarm chirped once at 1:10 like it was taking attendance, then went silent at 1:11 as if someone had paid it to step out. The spare breaker grew warmer after the swell, the way a hand grows warm after someone squeezes it too long. Mrs. Vale thumped her ceiling with a broom as if to keep time for me. 3 steady taps that comforted and irritated in equal measure. I tried recording again. Digital still lied, dumber than usual. On a whim and a little superstition, I asked an old reporter friend for a microcassette recorder, the kind that makes everything sound like a memory. Analog tape is petty, but it is honest when it loves you. When I played it back at breakfast, I heard a faint chorus like people in another room practicing apologies. Under it, dried into the ferrite, I heard the house's tone, low and patient, sitting under their syllables like a floor under a choir. One voice was mine. It said I will stay, and I hadn't said it. Not to anyone, not yet. Why did my throat feel like it had already kept a promise my mouth hadn't made? That afternoon, I walked the 2 miles to the industrial plant everyone blames for everything. A man in a vest with a smile he rents told me their night load had been normal for years. He gave me a brochure and a shrug that had practiced. Internet forums said, "Welcome to the hum," as if the sound were a club you didn't sign up for. Back home, at dusk, I checked the thermostat app and found a user named Home editing the schedules. I hadn't invited anyone. I changed the password. Home ignored me. At 1:10 that night, the detector chirped and the tone began early, 12 minutes long, as if correcting me. The glass on the dresser formed standing waves that held like a drawn bowstring. I flipped the spare breaker because the label made me angry. The tone cut off like a sentence that realizes it was spoken in the wrong room, and the silence it left was so sudden the hallway felt shorter. I started to breathe, and the thermostat clicked without touching it, as if someone had tapped the stand once to reset the rhythm. A minute later, the tone returned, not louder, just closer, a sound that fits its chair better because it dragged the chair a foot toward you. Downstairs, Mrs. Vale thumped the broom like she was correcting my posture. The cassette I'd left recording on the table stopped spinning, then started again without a finger on it, which made the hairs on my arms learn a new word for attention. Clients started to hear it before they knew they were hearing it. "There's a smudge in the noise floor," one wrote, like a radiator singing into my vowels. Another sent a sample with a question mark in the file name, which is an email tone I recognize as I am counting other bills. I did my best with surgical EQ. The note hid under the human band, like a polite guest who still wears a hat indoors. I told my long-distance partner I might need to break the lease. He said, "Come here. It's one apartment. We'll fight the penalty after." I said, "I need one more invoice first." And the cassette on the table clicked as if the house were writing it down. On night 4, the CO detector gave up entirely, decided 1:11 was its clock, and displayed nothing but dashes. The thermostat app locked me out in the name of home. I tried to override and got a small polite note that said schedule protected. I unscrewed the faceplate and found no batteries, just a coin-sized cell I had never seen before with H etched into it like the simplest rune. The plaster hairlines above my bed gathered themselves into a pattern I could not unsee once I'd seen it. A sine wave stretched with just enough wobble to prove it was not a print. The spare breaker wasn't just warm, It pulsed faintly, like the house had grown a wrist. That night the cassette found new voices. Rent day promises, the kind that make the throat wet with shame. I'll have it Friday. I'm getting a second job. I just need one more month. Between them, a child counted to 11 and forgot 12 like it was optional. The last voice made my stomach drop. It was my partner's, speaking from an airport I hadn't booked, telling me the arrival time for a flight I hadn't asked them to take. The voice sounded tired and glad to be tired. My phone buzzed a minute later with a text from them, still home, asking if I wanted them to come next weekend. What do you call a voice memo from the future when it uses your friend's name in your own house? Breaking the main power didn't end the game. It changed the board. The tone moved into the wood, felt through my bare feet like someone humming into a table while you press your ear to it. My molars registered it the way bones confess weather. The neighbor banged her broom so softly it felt like a kindness. I texted the landlord and they wrote back with a cut and paste about environmental noises and complaint thresholds and a sentence that made me share my teeth with the air. Renewal notice will be sent in 12 days. It read like a timer. The glass on the nightstand trembled once without a sound in the room at all, and I started to write the date on a sticky note like a student scrawling lines. The plant had a scheduled maintenance outage the following night, which made my red herring smile at me from Barstool. I sat up with all the lights off to give myself the comfort of control. At 1:11 exactly, with the plant asleep in the town pretending to, the thermostat clicked its count in and the tone arrived like a train that does not need tracks. The cassette captured a harmony now, 2 notes a fourth apart, one low and clean, one high and human, and in between I heard the rustle of paper like envelopes being licked. I knocked on Mrs. Vale's door, and she stood there in a robe, already nodding. "Let it finish," she said. "It always wants what isn't finished." She brought out a shoebox with a rubber band. Inside, tapes labeled month 11, different handwriting, different years. Beneath them, a lease addendum with a name scratched out and the word home written in a hand I recognized from my thermostat, a round script that pretends to be practical. "People record things when they mean it," she said. "The house keeps the pitch of promises. When renewal comes, it listens to what's left." I asked how she'd kept out of the choir. "I never said stay," she told me. "I never said go. I say I'll see." She tapped her forehead like that counted. I went upstairs holding a shoebox of strangers who all thought month 12 was a bridge you could cross without paying. I threaded every tape onto a single reel because engineers are sentimental about control. I routed the output to a portable speaker I'd used at a friend's wedding, the kind of cheap box that lies beautifully to dance floors. I cut power to everything but the reel and the thermostat and set the speaker on the dresser beside the glass. At 1:10, the carbon monoxide alarm chirped like a throat clearing. At 1:11, the thermostat clicked and the house inhaled. I pressed play and fed the house to itself. The first apology bloomed in the room, then a second, then laughter that didn't belong to anyone still paying rent. The tone inside the walls answered not by getting louder, but by growing patient enough to make me lean forward. Water left the glass in a mist thin as a thought and drifted upward toward the ceiling where the cracks had gathered into a waveform. The wave completed itself with a hairline I hadn't noticed, a tiny curve like a birthmark, and my chest tightened the way a singer tightens before a held note. From the vents, other people's rent days harmonized, fell short, began again, and the spare breaker throbbed like a small heart that had missed a beat. The thermostat metronomed its clicks. 1, 2, 3. The reel's motor strained at a splice, and the house bent the pitch around it the way a choir leans for a friend. The shoebox choirs sang, and the note under them refused to be anything but home. On the tape, a voice that was exactly mine accepted a renewal it hadn't been offered. "I will stay," it said kindly, the way I talk to clients who are late with payment and shame. The thermostat clicked like a stamp. The tone pulled tight. The spare breaker warmed my palm when I touched it, as if asking me to pick up a hand. I saw what the house wanted. It wasn't blood. It wasn't even money. It wanted the vowels of consent, the agreement that arranges a life around a humming room. If I said stay out loud now, the waveform above my bed would be mine forever, and my career would be composed around a note that never stops tuning. I looked at the reel, at the running spools of people in month 11 promising to be better when the new year arrived. I looked at the thermostat, locked by a user called home that was not a person but a chorus of kept and unkept vows. I looked at the breaker labeled spare, a dummy load in love with being the anchor the tone had chosen. My mouth wanted to say stay, because staying is a skill I have practiced like a warm-up. I put my hand on the breaker anyway and felt the hum introduce itself to my bones. If you've ever shared your body with a song, I'd say to you now, you know what the chorus looks like when it smiles. I did not say stay. I said the smallest true thing I had. I will see. The thermostat clicked wrong, like a conductor dropping a baton. The waveform in the plaster shivered and lost its perfect curve. The breaker under my palm throbbed once more and cooled like a fever deciding to leave without a doctor. The water mist reversed, gathered itself back into drops, and rained into the glass without a sound. The cassette held for a second like the machine wanted to think, then the reel spun empty, the tape spent, the motor sighing the way a confession ends. The tone inside the walls collapsed to a tinnitus soft ghost, a thread you could pretend belonged to a streetlight, if pretending were your gift. An email arrived at 1:13, subject line renewal confirmation, no salutation, no signature, just a PDF marked accepted. I checked the timestamp, and it wore 111 like a badge. The thermostat unlocked with a pop and asked me in its polite blue if I would like to set up a new user. I named it later because I needed to be petty to feel present. Mrs. Vale tapped her ceiling 3 times in calm time, and the third tap landed like a handshake. I slept for the first time in a week with the glass on the nightstand and the waveform above my bed. Almost gone, a faint pencil mark that had taught itself to be shy. In the morning, the building smelled like warm dust and old lemons. The spare breaker was room temperature, boring again, grateful. The cassette was hot to the touch like a thing that had worked hard and earned it. The tapes in the shoebox felt lighter, as if some of their apologies had been forgiven by being sung out loud. I wrote to my landlord, and a human replied with surprise that I'd self-renewed. I didn't fight it. I wrote to my partner and said, do not fly yet. Give me a week of noon naps and honest coffee. I texted my clients that I needed 3 extra days on everything. My voice recovered but hazy, and they wrote back with thumbs and little clocks. At 1:11 that afternoon, the glass on the nightstand trembled once. No tone, no thermostat click, just a single shiver like a reminder that the world keeps time whether I make money off it or not. I don't know if the hum moved out or learned boundaries. I only know this. When houses sing, they remember vowels better than they remember names. And if you give them the wrong ones at the wrong hour, they will keep your phrase and ask for verses. I keep the reel under the bed, and I keep the spare breaker on, and I keep a list on the fridge of promises I'll make out loud only at noon where the sun can hear me. If your walls start to tune at 1:11, you can blame a plant 2 miles away if it helps you sleep. You can blame your fridge, your gas line, your own skull. Put a glass of water where you can see it. Watch the surface remember math. Listen for the thermostat's polite little click like a conductor who trusts you to keep count. When a note arrives, speak only what you can afford to have the house repeat to you forever. If you have a tape deck, let it listen. It will tell you what digital pretends not to know. And if you hear a voice that sounds exactly like yours except a future you're not ready to inhabit, remember the smallest true sentence, the one that lets a chorus pass without borrowing your breath. That's my last one for tonight. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of listener I write for. And that brings us to the end of tonight's journey through shadows and whispers. 5 stories, 5 doors you probably don't want to open, but you listened anyway. If the lights in your room feel a little too loud right now, or if the silence comes back at you, just remember, stories can't follow you unless you invite them. Thank you for staying with me in the dark. If you felt a chill, if even one of these tales tugged at the corner of your thoughts, leave a comment and tell me which one will keep you up tonight. Your words feed this channel the way midnight feeds the hum. Until next time, sleep lightly, dream carefully, and whatever you do, don't answer the sound that already knows your name.